Nancy, take it away.
Okay, buenas tardes, bienvenidos, good afternoon, and welcome to our panel, Sonora at Sundance. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Nancy de los Santos, a writer and producer, and a very proud member of the WGA West, the Writers Guild of America West, and moderator for this afternoon's panel. Before we begin, please do know that we'll leave a few minutes at the end of the presentation for your questions. Just add them to the chat box and we'll get to as many as possible. Also, this event is being recorded and will be made available on TomKat Films and the Sundance Festival website. Our goal for this conversation is to have a candid and direct discussion about the representation or lack therefore of Latino and Latina themed projects in television and in film. And in doing so, to speak to the journey of developing a new scripted series with a Latina, a Mexicana, as its protagonist, with a story set on the very complex matrix of immigration and immigration law. The project is called Sonora and is based on the acclaimed book, which is both a history of the border and a true life memoir of a woman the author met while working on the Arizona-Mexican border area. The Death and Life of Aida Hernandez is authored by Aaron Bob Rose Strain, whose focus is on immigration and political economy of the US-Mexican border. The story actually begins with the lead character's almost death experience, hence the title, The Death and Life of Aida Hernandez. It moves on from there to become a compelling memoir of an undocumented woman whose life is suddenly upended and placed in great danger, forcing to flee her homeland and to begin a determined journey through the courts, prison, her own personal struggles, and the border itself in order to move forward and achieve her own American dream. This is a true story, both in its history and in the woman's memoir, as told to the book's author by the protagonist using the pseudonym of Aida Hernandez. And I'm very excited about this project, as I am excited about any project that has a reflection of the Latino community, especially when the story is from authentic storytellers and content developers from our community and our allies. I myself have been in this business over 25 years. I'm the associate producer of two iconic Latino themed films, My Family, Mi Familia, and Selena, the movie. I've pitched and developed and produced, and like so many people of color creatives, in spite of the barriers. I know the struggle, and believe me, the struggle is real. As a member of the Latino Writers Committee, I've heard stories that can only be described as completely tone deaf. Comments said during meetings, pitch meetings, such as, "Oh, you're from Mexico? My maid's from Mexico," as if we all know each other. Or when I was a new writer in town, an executive said to me, "If you want to succeed, you're going to have to learn how to write white." I had no idea what he meant, and I completely ignored his piece of advice. And then there's that very common remark that many writers of color have gotten after they pitch their heart out for a story, and that is, love the story, but how does the mainstream audience get into it? Which is executive speak for, is there a leading starring role for a non-Latino? It's as if they think a good story is not able to cross over community, cultural, and gender lines. As we all know, it can happen. Parasite, Roma, Black Panther are just a few. I get it, we all get it. This is a business, and the bottom line is for businesses to be successful monetarily. But research proves diversity is profitable. The Latino community is young. We are early adopters of new media. We love storytelling, and we love to see ourselves on the big and any of the many little screens available. We are moviegoers when the theaters are open, and I'm sure hoping that they'll be open again soon. We love to go to the movies, and we love to take our families to the movies. Bottom line is something needs to change, and that change is seen here in the presence of these 5 producers. Our panelists are the producers of Sonora, amazing women with distinct and very different life and professional experiences, 3 of whom are immigrants themselves. One was born and raised on the Sonora US border. And yet they all share a passion for this story and for social justice. So let's begin. Kat Taylor is the founder with her husband, Tom Snyder, of TomKat Films. Kat, welcome. I'm glad that you're with us here today. We know you as being very dedicated in supporting Black, Indigenous, and people of color representation in Hollywood in all of your endeavors. You produced, I have to say, two of my favorite films, both by filmmaker Peter Bratt, La Mission, with Benjamin Bratt, and of course the terrific, amazing, beautiful documentary of the iconic labor and social justice leader, co-founder of the United Farm Workers, Dolores Huerta. Why is it so important to you as a non-Latina producer to empower Latino voices in Hollywood?
Well, thanks very much, Nancy, and thanks for everybody who put this panel together. Special thanks to the Sundance Film Festival and the virtual Main Street platform for giving us this opportunity to convene almost in person around storytelling and important current topics.
Mhm.
So, as the Sundance community well knows, storytelling can be a powerful agent for systems change, which is why it's all the more important that we foster greater diversity, equity, and inclusion in the community of voices. And these days, at this important racial reckoning moment in our country, we need to decenter whiteness as well. So I'm showing up as an ally in service of storytelling, and excited to announce today that we're relaunching TomKat Films, which was the producer of, as you mentioned, of La Mission and Dolores. Past films also included other BIPOC voices, including The Cherokee Word for Water, which was about Wilma Mankiller's incredible leadership for mutual self-aid in the Cherokee community and tribe. She was the chief, actually. Becoming Bulletproof, which is a story produced, acted, directed by differently abled people in front of and behind the camera. 100 Years from Mississippi, about a woman who fled Jim Crow South from the violence and was came back to Montgomery, Alabama to witness the launching of the first memorial to the victims of lynching. And we hope to be supportive of Color Farm Media's Erica Alexander and Ben's amazing upcoming documentary on the first enactment of reparations in America called Dear Evanston. But I'd like to give a shout out also to my great, nearly lifelong friend, Marcela Davison Aviles, who we met during our education and even produced some things during law school. But she's been a standout producer of content through Blackboard Entertainment, she was also a huge champion activist for the Latina community as the head of the Mexican Cultural Center, as the founding head of the Latino Community Foundation. And most recently, she has huge credits for being the cultural whisperer for the movie Coco, which had worldwide amazing audience. So we are excited to relaunch TomKat Films today with Marcela as a partner in the endeavor, and hoping that we can continue to uncover hidden stories in partnership with diverse storytellers in pursuit of the common good, well-being, and especially racial and social justice. I personally, I'm involved in this as a white woman of privilege because I feel strongly that we need to retell and keep telling our country's history accurately. I was grossly miseducated as a person in America about the origins, that deeply troublesome origins of our country and the ongoing oppression and violence. And I believe strongly that we need to put more and different people in charge to get the story right. So starting with the frontline communities who have been hurt the worst and first, they know the solutions, some of which are longstanding cultural practices and ways. This is the way we can finally decolonize wealth by decolonizing investments, loans, and grants, and support community engagement, community control, and communal ownership. I don't want to just reconcentrate wealth. When everybody owns a little bit of everything and no one owns too much of anything, we shall thrive, which is why I've also taken the Good Life Pledge to shift a third of the assets under my control to community ownership before I die. Shifting power includes shifting wealth, land, opportunity, access, and voice. And that's what TomKat films need to be about, revealing important voices and empowering them to retell our story. So we'll continue at TomKat Films to support productions that bring to the fore diverse voices, including in the case of Sonora and the death and life of Aida Hernandez, the very, very important Latina views on the geopolitical struggles around economic disparity, violence and oppression, immigration, and the American dream for who? For all.
Wow, I am so glad you are here, Kat. Thank you so much. It is so important for our community, for all communities of color, for all communities to have allies. And I applaud you for being for being a very important part of this ally network. And change is on the horizon. Change is coming, and I can feel it. And even the time that I've been here in Hollywood, I see it coming, and I see it with projects such as this. I'd like to move on now to Marcela Davidson Aviles, who is the project producer, along with Kat. As you mentioned, she's a partner in TomKat Films. And I love this role that she has as a Hollywood cultural whisperer for the Latino projects. And Kat, Marcela did an incredible job on Coco, as we know, because all of the details were true. And it's the first time I'm in a movie and not saying, oh no, they got that wrong. They got it right. Thank you, Marcela. So Marcela, please tell us about this book, and when did you first come across it? What attracted you to it? Marcela?
Unmute myself. Here we
Yes,
go.
okay, there you go.
Thank you, Nancy. And my hermana, my comadre, Kat Taylor, muchísimas gracias. Thank you so much for your work and your love and your grace that you leave for everyone every day, including the work that we're doing now with TomKat Films. I became acquainted with Aida's story when I read a review of the book in the New York Times. And I was, at the time, I was looking for opportunities to find stories that I might be able to help the storyteller as a producer, to illuminate further the Latino, Latina, Latinx, Hispano community, our stories. And so when I saw the review, seeing that it was about the border, and it was about two towns, Agua Prieta and Douglas, Arizona, in Sonora. Being a girl from Sonora, I'm from Nogales, I said, I've got to read this book. And when I started reading it, I just, it really spoke to my heart as someone who, I grew up on the border. I was born in Nogales. I grew up in Tucson. I'm from the Southwest. And I know what it's like to be part of a border community where you can easily go back and forth. And I know also what it was like when suddenly there's a fence there. And not only a fence, but there's concertina wire. It's like a dagger, goes right through your heart. Because if you're a child of the border, you don't really think that there's a border. You don't think that there's a line. You just, you cross the line to see your family or to go shopping on either side of the line. It's a big community, a big region of interconnected families and businesses and history going back hundreds of years. So Aida, the story of Aida is my story. I felt, there but for the grace of God, because she met so many challenges that I did not encounter in my life. I took a different route. I was very, very fortunate and privileged to have the opportunity to get the education I did and to grow up with the encouragement that I did. Aida has had a tough life. And the book starts with an extreme event, which is her near murder. And from there, she is literally wills herself back to life. And she's on the American side because they have to take her to an American hospital to survive. And then she's taken back to Mexico, and I won't get ahead of myself with the story, but suffice to say that at that moment, she starts a journey. And she is determined not only to simply come back to life, but to make a life for herself and to make her mark. And that's a story that isn't often told. And I'm deeply committed to, as a producer and as a storyteller myself, to doing the work to decolonize, shall we say, because people are using that word for good reason, the narrative. Because we've had a narrative about the border, about Mexico, about Mexican Americans, Latinos, South America, that was hijacked. And it wasn't just recently that it was hijacked. It was hijacked, going back to the history of New Spain by Bernal Diaz. And so we know that those who control the narrative control us, control power over policy and over the civic culture. And if you can take your storytelling back, and if you can illuminate accurately with cultural authenticity, with orgullo, with pride, con amor, with love, then I think you will be able to at least, as we did with Coco, cross that marigold bridge, to have people come together and hopefully find common ground. And that's what Aida's story is. It's a story of this woman's resilience and just sheer grit to take control of her life and to contribute, to be a member of the civic culture. So that is all to say, it's a beautiful story. It deserves to be told. It's going to be told. It'll be told the right way. And I'm very proud to be part of this team.
Right. Well, I guess you've gone from the marigold road to crossing over the ugly, ugly fences that have been built on our beautiful border. And I know that a story like this is going to make that leap over the iron and the barbed wire and whatever else they have there, because that border does not need to be there and doesn't need to be portrayed that way. So, applause to you also, Marcela. I'd like now to move on to one of the project's executive producers, Giselle Fernandez, and total transparency, one of my dear friends. I love her mucho. She is, of course, a veteran journalist with 6 Emmy Awards and producer. And besides being a full-time journalist, she's also been on the development end of many Latino-themed stories and projects for as long as I have. So I guess, Giselle, we could also call you a veterana. So
at my age, yes.
So it's such a simple question, but I often will leave a pitch meeting and say, why not just give it a try? Why not tell this story? What is the speed bump? What is the fear? Is it fear-based? Why is it so difficult to get Latino stories produced?
Well, I'll answer that by saying there are no excuses anymore. Hollywood has the power to combat these damaging stereotypes, and it's failing in doing so. And I've been around what they called the taco beat for a long time in journalism. I didn't see myself on the air or people like me, and to see it, you have to be it, you have to see it. That phrase that I want to see myself in the art that's reflected back at me, because when we don't, and I'll answer it this way, Nancy, when we don't, it's not even cancel culture, it's erasure culture. Right. And what happens when you don't see 20% nearly of the population reflected back at you on the big screen and all of your streaming? You feel invisible. And what happens when you're invisible? You are dehumanized. And what happens when you're dehumanized as a culture, or even demonized as a culture? You can rip children from mothers at the border who come in under constitutional asylum laws because you're not human anymore. People can go and massacre people in El Paso shopping center on a Sunday when they know Latinos will be there, because we're not human anymore. And who bears that responsibility? Well, You know, we all do. But in terms of the systemic racism and what's been called the Hollywood apartheid is very much in existence, even though we talk about it, you know, Oscars so white no more, it is still really exclusionary. You know, we make up, I said, 20% of the population, yet we only portray 3% of starring roles in film in the past decade, 4.5% of speaking roles. And predominantly, when we are archetyped in film, it's either mostly the macho culture or it's thugs, gang leaders, MS-13, narcos, and women. We are the most over-sexualized, you know, archetypes in film and television. And what does that do again? And the bizarre part about it is that we control, you know, 1.7, nearly $2 trillion in buying power. And I like to say this because Hollywood is a business and it's about economics.
Yep.
But we are the biggest movie going audience. We account for 25% of the box office. And we, as you said, over-index in downloads and streaming and content and gaming, which is also the future of content production down the line. And, you know, when you ask why then, if there's so much money to be made, do they not pay more of attention? It's almost like we're the other sub, you know, audience that we have to cater to because diversity pressures, as opposed to recognizing, you know, when they look at Fast and Furious, guess what? Latinos over-indexed and watched that film, you know, 4 or 5 times more than any other demographic. The same is true of the Titanic. There is no Latino ethnic film that would, you know, attract our audience. We like good story because we are part of this country. When you talk about the importance of sharing our history, we actually were Mexico before we took parts of California and Texas. So we need to know our history, not from a political or historical, you know, aspect alone, because when we do, you realize we belong here. And we are a burgeoning economy here. And so it's only smart business. So what has to happen is, why are we not more? Because we only have, you know, white men at the head of studios and producers and in the writer's room and the casting. It's less than 3% of us are in the casting room or producers. So even though 4 out of the 5 directors who won Academy Awards in recent years were Latinos, that doesn't mean that there's still access for all of us to come in and engage. So what has to happen? We don't take crumbs anymore. We talented storytellers must come together, and because of allies like Shelley Reed, who brought me into this project and introduced me to Marcella and to Kat, who care about reflecting who we really are in America, because we know, as someone on another panel said to me under Kat's purview, imagination meets the intersection of impact. If you put beautiful stories that are rich and universal in theme, like Sonora, Aida's story, all of a sudden we see ourselves in that universal tale. And I'll just kind of end with this. Aida is the woman's face of modern immigration story. We define, you know, the wetbacks coming across the border as the working class, the peasants who can be the slave class of this generation. Not so. We are, you know, the mothers who leave everything behind because we can't find democracy and equity where we are because of high-level politics going on, the NAFTA trade, behemoth agreements. And who gets caught and snagged in the middle? A young woman who grew up on both sides of the border, who was synergistic in living the life as a Mexican and with American values too, and all of a sudden gets snagged like a spider in a web. So I say all these things because when you see her story and her tenacity and her resilience, she's like the American dream. She, like de Tocqueville, the land of the second chance, she rises again to make it, because that is her fuerza, as we say in Spanish. That is the force of her being. These stories must be told.
Right. It is the story of many of immigrant groups that have come for decades to this country, created this country, built this country. And it should be no different from an immigrant story from Italy or Ireland or Europe or whatever. Immigrants need to be respected and their stories need to be told. So thank you for your role in this, dear Giselle. So 2 of our other producers are Cynthia Sykes-Yorkin and Shelley Reed. Together, they are the founders of Reed Yorkin Productions. Cynthia is an acclaimed actress. I'm sure once you see her, you're going to say, I remember that girl. And she's also the producer of the Oscar-winning film Blade Runner 2049. Shelley is a industry executive and has worked at Fox, Disney, A&E, and most recently at MGM. So Shelley, you've done many, many deals like Fargo, Handmaid's Tale, The Americans, love that show, Vikings, and so many more. As a veteran producer, you probably do have your choice of projects that you can produce. So why this one?
Well, first of all, we want to, I think I can speak for Cynthia also here. We want to thank Kat and Marcella and Giselle for inviting us into this project. We were tangentially aware of the project before we got involved as producers on the project. And also it's delightful to see Aaron here, the author of the book. I'm looking at him here. So, and of course to Sundance. So thank you very much for including us. But what drew us to this project, I think it's fair to say that, you know, we started this company because we were interested in telling interesting stories that had some kind of value. You know, there is, it is doable to have social justice through storytelling, which has been the theme throughout this year's Sundance Festival. And it's so exciting because from that, possibly you can make a little bit of impact. And certainly this story being a true story, being so well researched and written by Aaron. And, you know, for us as a company, you know, we've been touching on stories that, you know, are environmental, this story that's, you know, an immigration story. We have something else that's dealing with the geopolitical elements of the US Latin American border, something with Wall Street. And this story is fascinating because not only is it Aida's story, but on top of it, there's this wonderful umbrella of the geopolitical machinations going on at the time between US and Mexico through NAFTA. And Cynthia, jump in here, please, love, because I'm running on. But
you're doing very well.
But I think it's really as Kat is her mission, and Marcella and Giselle both expressed, it's the narrative of the stereotype. And so the challenge of this is making sure that this story is told. I mean, it is a business. We have to make it have entertaining value, but telling this story so it is not in the shadow of all of these really negative stereotypes of Latin people and Mexicanos. And, you know, the immigration issue is so important at the moment, what's going on. So exactly. It is a modern immigration story, and it's a little story within a very, very big story. So that's, I think, in a nutshell, what, you know, drew us to it. Cynthia?
Well, you said it very well. I also had, you know, the idea of Indigenous people being so downtrodden, so dehumanized, so demonized. We also have a Cherokee Nation story about a woman. My ancestor was the medicine woman of the Cherokee Nation. And so I have this relationship here with Aida of a woman that is in a time where she is caught in this dangerous, powerful forces beyond her control, shifting sands, and trying to navigate this and stay alive. And I think that the drama of this it can be entertaining for people, but also enlightening about what Indigenous people go through, what a woman goes through. As this is every woman's story, and being caught in the crossfire of all these major forces that she's just naive about, and no one would have thought would have happened this way, and that America would not reach out and be the support system and dream that she thought it was, that these kind of male dominating political ideas are impacting her life in a way that it's a punishment of people that don't deserve that. And so I just with Shelley, you know, relate to this woman's journey, this courageous woman's journey beyond her control, not her fault, that is so daunting, yet she rises, as Giselle said, rises again, and you just root for her. And I think, as Shelley said, making this a story that is entertaining but authentic is our goal. So that's what we want to do and accomplish with all these wonderful women and brilliance of our producers and Kat,
Great.
Ella, Giselle, it's Shelley. It's all wonderful, synchronistic, and we all kind of feed off of each other and learn. And I'm learning so much about this, not being Latino, but I'm learning this whole terrible time that we're in and history.
Right. Thank you for that, Annette. Thank you. I can't imagine what your story meetings must be like to have all of you in one room discussing it, and how wonderful that must be. I myself was in a writer's room where it was all Latinas, and I have to tell you, it was just sheer joy to go to work knowing that we were there all with the same goal. And I know we must have egos as women, but everyone put them aside for the project. And I feel you all are doing that. It's for the project. How do we move the project forward? How do we keep it authentic? How do we keep the voice there that is so important so that it can cross over from being a film that you need to see to being a film that you're going to want to see because it's exciting and it's dramatic and there's going to be a lot of surprises and plot twists. And that, of course, means you need to have writers. And so our next panelist, I'm really excited to meet her, is Karen Zacharias. And she is a celebrated playwright, internationally known and respected. And she is the writer on the development phase of this project. So Karen, I have written for the theater. I love it, love it, love it. I just couldn't pay my bills writing for the theater. So as anyone who has written for the theater, as opposed to writing for television, a television series, I know there's a big difference. I'd like to hear your experience on that. How did you navigate the transition of theater, which is imagination, and then the elephant walks in, and television is not like that. Drama is not like that. Tell us your experience and why this story, why this time, why was it important to you?
Well, first of all, thank you everybody for having me here, and thank you. I see a number of friends and allies out there. When Marcella called me with this book, I felt it was a match made in heaven. I am an international relations major, so all the themes that are going on there. I mean, Erin so well captured the complexity and nuance of what's going on politically and geopolitically with this story of a young woman who's brimming with opportunity and resilience and challenges. And as a Mexican immigrant myself, I crossed the border. I had to go through the Byzantine process of trying to become a US citizen and all of that. I understood how hard it is to know that you could lose your community very easily, that you have to move back to a place that you're from, but you no longer feel like you belong there. So there was both a heart feeling there and also a real interesting intellectual attraction to the book. The work I do is always subversive, is always trying to talk about Latino themes and making them accessible, entertaining, and subversive to audiences. So I felt this was a great story that, in a sense, we could not only look at this young woman, we look at the community that surrounds her, the militarization of the border. Who are the people? Because everything is made of people, right? Everyone has their wants and needs, etc. And we look at this community and see what are the things that are happening. So it's kind of a little bit where Friday Night Lights meets Homeland, in a sense. We're seeing all of this energy and how this puts pressure on this young woman and her friends and her colleagues and the border, and how it feels to be actually sent to the other side. Because there's a lot of stories that don't tell us about how it feels to go back that way. And so I was completely inspired. And as a playwright, I will say that I understand structure, I understand story, I understand themes, and actually moving to TV is liberating because I could suddenly go, oh, in one image, we can create so much that's happening here. So I feel like I've always thought in a cinematic way. And so it was really great to finally be able to approach it in that way and tell a subversive story of this young girl and how she overcomes. Because the other part of it, as grim as some of the things are, is there has to be, we have to be cheering for her, and we have to feel hope, and she has to be funny, and she has to be real. Part of the dehumanization of these stories is they're all becoming numbers. So what we want as a team is for people to feel like Aida is a friend of ours, our daughter, our next door neighbor, and we start rooting and seeing a side of her story that we've never seen before. And so this is like a dream come true. And with these chingona women here who are like making new things and writing new, it's, the word frontera in Spanish is different than the word border.
True.
Border is about stopping things. Frontier, frontera, is about what lies beyond. And I feel as a team, these women are starting a new frontier, and it's really exciting to be a part of it at this point. So thank you.
Nancy, can I just add something?
Absolutely.
To Karen's brilliant narrative. It's like a Halley's Comet, the understanding of who we are in this country. And, it's the Latina, the woman who is 80% are the breadwinner in our Latino households. We think of it as a macho culture. It is not. And yet, we start businesses 7 times more than any other demographic. And again, we control the minds and what goes into the mouths of the youngest minority under 18, which over indexes on downloading and movie watching, etc. And yet, every time we see a Latina portrayed on screen, it's either a prostitute or some, hanger-on, maid, which does not reflect this growing, economic class in this country. And so we don't see ourselves in the characters and the stars that we portray. I think that's why Selena did so well. She was this young American Latina bringing her kind of music, and we identified so many young women, and well, not just women, but audiences identified with that character. And yet we don't see a Latina businesswoman. We don't see the Latina lucha. We just don't see her. So imagine Aida, this girl who has big dreams, by the way, as any young girl would have, coming from any nation in the world, to come and make her life's dreams in America and bring her culture with her. Where do we see that in film? And her story is exciting and daring and really complicated. And yet she, like I always say, like Scarlett O'Hara, she will not lose. And that fuerza is so damn inspiring.
Right. And you're so right about the images that we see of in any kind of movie for immigrants. It's usually the male and with the woman left behind. And that's not how it is. So often it is the woman who comes because they can find work easier. And they leave their children. It's just so sad. Or they bring their children with, which is even more harrowing. And what you said, very true too about Selena, even today, there are so many young Selena fans, young girls who look up to her. And I know that this movie or this project, the Sonora project, also has a musical element to it. I don't want to spoil it for the audiences, but that's really exciting that she has this goal, to become something, to really explore that art through her culture, and do it here in the United States, which will be terrific. And talking about, I just want to remind people that we will be taking questions. If you have any questions, put them in the chat box, and we will have our person who's taking care of that filter them to me, and then we'll ask our panelists questions. But I also read that there was the tone of the show. I guess this question could be for any of the producers. It may go to Marcella. But the tone of the show, I had to really look at it and say, wow, this is deep, this is complex, this is rich. It was Think Traffic, the movie Traffic, meets Fauda, which is an Israeli television show about immigration, meets Vida, which of course is a wonderful show on Stars that celebrated queer Latino life in East LA. One more, meets Canción Mexicana Mixteca, which is a song, as most of us who have our roots in Mexico consider to be the unofficial Mexican anthem that celebrates all of the estados de Mexico. That's a lot. I mean, Traffic meets Fauda meets Vida. Mixcanción Mixteca. Who wants to tell me how they developed that? Marcella, would that be you?
Yeah, I'll take that on.
Okay.
I think that for me, the heart of Mexicanidad, of Mexican culture, is it comes from the soul, and what is in the soul is its music. And Mexican music has global influences. Some of those beloved genres of folk music have their origins in Africa via Veracruz, son jarocho, son huasteco. La Bamba is from that region and has those roots. And if you are fans of the golden era of film in Mexico and mariachi cowboy musicals and some of the most beautiful ballads and boleros and mariachi ranchera songs came from those movies. But the thing about those films is that they weren't musicals. They allowed the song to be part of the narrative. It wasn't just source music. It wasn't just the music that you kind of hear in the background. The music was the part of the story, and the story was told through singing and through music. And I'll, to harken back to one of the most wonderful moments from Coco, which is a movie for adults, I like to say, as for family as well as kids, but it was intended for adults. There's a moment when a character, Mama Imelda, is singing, and she belts out one of the most authentic, if not the most quintessentially authentic song in Mexico, which is La Llorona. And everyone is really into that song. They kind of jazz it up. It's a beautiful, beautiful moment. But another reason it's a beautiful moment is because the writers flipped the narrative. They took control of the narrative. And instead of a man singing a serenade up to a woman, to woo her, it was the woman who was in command. It was the woman who was controlling the narrative with the song that she chose. She is singing a serenade to the man she loves, who is down below. And so what I am really hoping for Aida is that we can be innovative in our use of music in the storytelling, and to evoke some of the most essential aspects, I think, of the journey that migrants take, a feeling of nostalgia for home, a profound sense of yearning for home, while they are trying to make home, a new home. And it's that narrative is in Mexico's music. It's in Mexico's song. It's in Mexico's ballads. And incidentally, some of the most prolific composers in Hollywood were from Mexico. That folks don't know. So my hope is that we know that Aida has an artistic soul, and that she's happiest at times when she's expressing herself through her art without adding any spoilers. And so I think that what we want to do is to create a story in which the reality of the border, the authenticity of Sonora in its beauty as a region, and it through its people, and through her authentic story of yearning for a future that she can control, is told. And one way to do it is to thread through the narrative a music direction. And I'm going to be very envious of whoever gets to be the music director for this project, because they're going to have a lot more leeway, I think, than one might have on a project like that. So that's why we're expressed sort of the tone of the project the way we did.
So yeah, music will be an important part of this, and I'm really looking forward to that. I'd like to ask Shelley and Cynthia. I have produced, on a much different level than you have. I'm the producer that's going around scrounging for money to do documentaries or to pay for whatever project I was trying to get. Do you get off the ground do you find that it is, well, every project I know is difficult to get funding for, but as producers of social justice themed projects, as compared to the projects that you have that may be more action-oriented drama, mystery, love stories, is it more difficult to get funding from them, for them?
Well, I think the secret is you can't let them know it's a social justice story, right? Otherwise, you
I
won't get
like that. What do you
and
tell them? What do you tell them?
well, I think that, when you're in the room, and you have someone like Giselle, for example, that, is really in the front lines of all that's happening in the real world, has all this journalistic authenticity and integrity that people respect. Then if you have smart executives, they're going to get it. And they're going to get that and the reason that we put Fauda in, which seems possibly counterintuitive, is that that's a story about Israelis going, Israeli Mossads going into Palestine, and they live on the border. And number one, it's a border story. Number two, it's about two cultures that have had ongoing, never-ending conflict. And yet the story is very authentic in terms of you don't feel it's one-sided, notwithstanding the fact that it's produced and performed primarily by Israelis and brilliantly written and brilliantly executed. But I think everybody has difficulty finding money and setting up a project, but that's why we have the auspices of Aaron's book. We get to wag the flag with someone like Karen, and it's all about the package and the elements that we can put together that will hopefully make this an attractive package. And there is the lip service and hopefully the real action happening in Hollywood to be inclusive, to celebrate diversity, to try and overcome the stereotypical systemic racism that does exist and continues to exist, in terms of gender, in terms of race, in terms of sexual preference, etc. So I think that we're hoping to be able to play into that, but you have to play into it with this great, compelling story, which fortunately,
Yes.
that's what we have to work with. So
It seems like all those things that you just mentioned, that's a great big treasure chest of new ways, new stories, new things to tell. I would imagine, I know the project is represented by the Gerst agency. Roy Ashton is the agent. When you took this project to him, was he as excited as you were about it and said, okay, let's do this?
well, we were very fortunate to get access to Karen because she happens to be a Gersh client in New York. So, we've had great support from Gersh all the way along.
Good, good, okay. So Kat, I'd like to go back to you. I have taught film history, and mostly about Latino film history. And one of the questions that I ask my students, would you prefer to not be in a movie, or would you prefer to be in a movie and be shown negatively? 85 to 15, it was, I would prefer to be in the movie. People want to be seen on the screen. And my question to you though is that there's so many media that you could have used. Why movies? Why television? Why did you feel like that was the way to continue and to push forward social justice?
I think in the absence of positive stories that are retelling our history with the most important voices and so on, the tropes and the racism and the stereotypes take over because Hollywood is very, very powerful. Who knew we'd all be not only on Zoom every minute of the day, but likely on Amazon Prime and Netflix and everything else. But my husband, Tom Steyer, said to me a long time ago, movies are the pyramids of the future. This is what we will leave behind as well. So getting it right is super important. And that's a shocking statistic that people would preponderantly rather be viewed negatively or inaccurately than not viewed at all.
Yeah.
So it has huge draw. Storytelling is all the rage right now, and Hollywood, we've got to conquer Hollywood.
So a question from the audience, and it would be to, I guess, whoever is going to be considered to be a line producer here. How does a project like this get rolled out in development? So I'm thinking, Marcella, you got the book, you got the rights to the book. You then find other people who can support that and become allies. Then what is the next step for the project?
Well, I'll speak to that, but I also think that Giselle and Shelley can really weigh in. But I think the first pieces you described very well. You know, one way that folks can attempt to share their stories is to write the story themselves and pitch those stories. I decided that that was going to be a very tough for me to do, since I don't have any credits to my name. I have lots of credits as being the culture whisperer, but that only gets you so far in the industry. And so I began to look for books that told stories that hit me deeply, where I could resonate and try to pitch them successfully, because you know they're telling my story as well. So Kat and I optioned the rights to the book, and so from there we set out to find folks that could, you know, I like to joke with Giselle, I needed someone to be the grown-up in the room, and someone who we could work with, who has more experience than us in the industry, who can help us to shape the story, who can help us to pitch the story. And that is why Shelley and Cynthia are so important, because it's a tough business, as we all know. And a part of it is the intangible aspect of creating the story, but the other part is the intangible aspect of being successful in the pitch room. But the other part of it is getting access to the pitch room, and to, you know, that's a major issue that we're all speaking to relative to access in the industry. And if you can't get into the room, you know, it's very hard. So I knew that I was going to have to build a team, that this was not a project that any one person, I think, could do by themselves. And so the first person I went to was Kat, because I felt that Aida's story would resonate with Catherine, and was so fortunate that it did. And then Shelley, who I've known for a few years, piped right up and said, let's bring Giselle on. And then we partnered with Reed Yorkin. And so now the next step in development was to, you know, take the book and really figure out a way to take its narrative and translate it into cinema, whether it's TV or film. And what's that story going to be? And we felt we needed to find a writer who could work with us in the development phase, who could help us do that. And we were very fortunate that Karen joined us, because her story is we have a lot in common with Aida, let's just put it that way, in terms of her journey. And then the rest of the rollout, I might pass it on to Giselle or to Shelley, in terms of, and I think this is an important part of our dialogue, because so many people who are wanting to emerge into the business from BIPOC communities kind of don't know this side of it, you know. And I'm gonna lob the ball over to Giselle, because she's very astute at understanding the dearth that exists in the development community in terms of development execs. You know, there aren't a lot of Latinos who are development execs, and part of the challenge is when you're pitching to folks who are kind of inherently perhaps not going to get it, or be, you know, there's just sometimes a wall that's there in the pitch room. It's like you're pitching to a wall sometimes, and so it's going to be so helpful, I think, when the industry gets to a place where the diversity that we seek, the equity will be achieved when you start to have diversity in the room. But Giselle, what's your feeling on that?
Well, I do see some changes. I see, $1 million, options for Latinx writers on the, they're one-ofs. I see the Netflixes and Amazons and Hulus, they are, and Shelley could talk more to this, I see them really building up their Latin studios and content. But in terms of cracking, a studio system here in Hollywood that considers us a subculture and a sub-audience that's not the mainstream, even though we are the super consumers and the economy of the future. Hollywood executives right now are they just don't get it, and they don't understand the wealth of opportunity that exists and who we are. So to me, it comes down to story. Either we're going to still accept crumbs and, try our hardest to get our stories told at a time when we are 20% of the population with $2 trillion in buying power, with women particularly leading the way, and our children downloading more than anything. They just have failed, and they can talk about diversity all they want, but there is a system of systemic racism and apartheid that exists. So how do you combat it? You tell good stories, and you identify the good stories, and you try and buy them. What happens is when people are trying to get into this space now, and so non-Latinos are buying up space or this content, and then unfortunately sometimes don't know what to do with it, and it's an appropriation that does not serve us well at times. So how do you combat it? You partner with people like Shelley and Cynthia, who are super woke, and you have Kat, whose whole life and portfolio is about equity and understanding that economics and art, if they come together, we can move the needle. And so what's going to move the needle for all of us? Yes, getting us more in the room and in positions to greenlight, and writers and producers that know what we're talking about to bring these stories to life. But in absence of that, we got to tell our own stories and bring them, to people like Kat and to Shelley, who know the systems and can manipulate it and help us get in until we show what we are and who we are, and then game over,
Great. So adding to that, you're right, game over. Adding to that right now, we have this wonderful audience at Sundance, and I'd like you all to have an opportunity to ask them to do something. What is their call to action as audience members? I'm sure most of them are writers, producers, directors, but we all have a part of this. When I see a movie that is from the African American community, I make it a point to watch that movie. I make it a point to put it on my social media. I want to share it. When I see a movie that's from anywhere other than the United States of America, I watch it, I share it, I let people know that the world is so much bigger than just our country or just Hollywood. So as we get ready to close here on our panel on this session, what is the takeaway you would like our audience members to have? What can we ask of them? So let's start with Karen. Karen, what would you like our audience members to do to support this effort for social justice in theater and in movies?
First of all, you are the consumer. You can ask for it. There's ways, just like voting. What we've seen happen in this country when people show up, this is what happens. We can start demanding more. I mean, part of it is not taking the crumbs. A lot of what we've done in the theater community is, instead of just knocking on doors, like, let's create our own work. Let's make sure it gets out there. And then people started coming to us. So there is the idea that we have something very worthwhile and we don't have to ask forgiveness, and in fact, be very proud. I think the fact that these women are here and doing this is exactly what we need to do. And the fact that there's so many people listening to this is the beginning of something really exciting. But we have the right to demand more because, we are part of the fabric of this country. Punto y aparte.
Yeah, exactly. I've been told that one email saying, hey, how come you don't have this on television? Or, hey, I saw this and I really love this on television, is worth 50 letters. So who knows? But I go around telling people that is, if you really like something, send an email. Now I guess you could just tweet about it and it'll get just as much attention on that. Let's see, Cynthia and Shelley, what would you like our audience? What would the takeaway be from the producers here?
I think to persevere, to create, to keep creating, getting your ideas down, and align with other people that are like-minded and like consciousness, and build upon it of the inroads that have been made in
Mhm.
whatever in the Latino community. People that are writers I know are supportive of other writers and helping move that needle, move it along, and make those introductions. It seems like it's a big business, but it really narrows down and comes down to people and helping each other
Mhm.
and learning from each other and say, oh, I know so and so, or let me call this person, or I like that project. Let's team up on it. And I
Mhm.
think there's power in numbers
Right.
and in experience.
Mhm.
And that's
Share.
make it personal for you to how to move yourself forward.
Yeah. What we learned in kindergarten, share.
Yeah.
Share the information. Shelley, what would you like to tell our panel audience here?
I think it's really about all of us trying to remember, as difficult as it is sometimes, to really stick to your passion and to your inner truth, and know that we are part of the media has tremendous influence, not just consciously, but subliminally. And we're living at a time where we're in the midst of this vortex of historical change and change, a cultural change, a social change, an economic change, all of those changes. Excuse me, my phone rang. And we need to be responsible about it.
Mhm.
And I also think that as excuse me, as Cynthia mentioned, we have an executive who's participating here today, someone I worked with at Fox, Matt Lowe. And Matt Lowe's knows about this project, and he picked up the phone and called another very important Latino producer to make him aware of this. And it's that helping tree, and
Sure.
hopefully it's like the coffee cup. The karma will come around.
Good. Very nicely put. Thank you so much. Kat, what's the takeaway
First
for
of
the
all,
audience?
Shelley is a comedian as well. That was hilarious. I'll take care of that.
Drop the mic.
Feels good to laugh. So I actually am a naive, and I had no experience as a creator or a producer of content, narrative content. When Benjamin and Peter Bratt approached me about funding La Mission, and Laura O'Connor was part of that effort too. Thank you, Laura. But I trusted them. That was my biggest act of allyship. I just trusted them. They were men who come from the light. They had an important love story to tell about a father and a son. And I just gave the money and got out of the way. And I think that's actually, so I'm speaking to funders of social change narratives and philanthropists and everybody else that it's time to give the money and get out of the way. Don't make it painful and restricted and everything else. Find someone you trust who has an important voice to bring to bear, and recognize the power of narrative and storytelling to not just support change movements, to actually create them.
Thank you. That is beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Giselle, I know you and I have spoken about this many times, about the absence of true representation, and what can we tell our audience now?
Make the change. It's
make it.
open the door. And I love this story, and I'll repeat it because it will inspire those who can and should. J.J. Abrams, A-list producer, he told his agents and managers in the studios, do not send me a list of actors, producers, showrunners, unless half of that list is of diverse candidates and diverse voices and talented people from diverse communities. And I think that's where we begin to make real change. When we look in our own lives and say, this is a story, I'm passionate about it, I know it resonates, not just with Latinos, it happens to be a Latino story, but I am you. And Aida, no one's gonna go, oh, that's a Mexican girl story, that does not resonate with me. She is you. And what a more beautiful, invigorating story to be able to tell, that everyone can see that immigrant story that makes up the identity of America in her, but told through the journey and adventure of a Latina. That's brilliant. We just need to make sure that those in studio positions and people who are casting and producing understand we are not the other. We are you. Open the door and make a conscious effort to do so, and then we'll see change. And by the way, we'll see great storytelling.
Absolutely, you're right. Before I go to Marcella, there was a question that came to our audience, and I'm going to direct it to Karen as the writer of development on this project. She is asking, or this person is asking, what is the role that academia, narrative, inquiry, and research can contribute to the work that you all are doing? So what is the role of academia, or what can they do? I guess simply, is research important?
Yes, absolutely. Scholarship is a form of witnessing. What we've been suffering as a people is a form of invisibility. And the idea that we are documented, and the whole idea of undocumentation goes through all sectors of life, not just with papers, but we're just, we're not asked opinions in the newspaper. We don't have a point of view for a lot of things. So the idea of scholarship is a vital part of taking us, making us part of history, having an opinion, pushing things on social media. Scholarship is part of testimony and witnessing the work of others. And it's what helps art take a permanent part in a society. So it's a very, very important part of it. And I'm so glad that question came up.
Good, good. So anthropologists, sociologists, psychologists, get out there and do all the research and write the books and let us know about them, and we'll make the movies. It sounds like a plan. And let's see, Marcella, tell me what you think is the takeaway for our audience today.
Well, that's a great question. And I think my response might be that it is true that if you build it, they will come. That's very true. One of the things that that I learned from working on Coco was, we were very nervous. Everyone was nervous about that movie. It's like, is anyone going to want to see this movie about, set in during the Dia de Muertos, Day of the Dead? But what we learned, and to Karen's point with regard to the scholarship and the research and the dramaturgy and the community coming in to add its voice, and did, working, sort of hand in glove with the filmmakers. When that movie came out, I mean, the impact was just like a bomb had gone off. I mean, I was getting, strangers finding out my phone number and sending me videos of them sobbing into their phone. I'm not kidding you. Thank you so much. I mean, it was like our story, our authentic story had not been told for so long. A. B, the attitude about us had been so negative for so long. I mean, can anyone remember the good neighbor policy? Does anyone, know even what it is? And so, right. And so the impact from that, setting aside all the money that it made, and is still making, we learned that entire regions, felt part of what we were trying to say. I think one of the reasons why the film was so successful in China was because the story touched a heart of a common feelings, cultural engagement with regard to feelings over ancestry, and that folks embraced the film there. But the other piece of it was, who doesn't know a little kid that has a little guitar with the little skulls on the fret that, is now wanting to be a musician. So the impact of music education was actually quite profound. And so I think that the combination of an entire community feeling validated for once, and happy, that the joy that came from people. And then the other piece of that was, sort of, I'm going to do a pun on my own comment, was our community didn't watch that movie once. We watched it again and again and again, in Spanish, in English, with like, 20 people from our families coming with us. And so we love to go to the movies. We love to hear stories. We love to tell stories. We love to make up stories. Storytelling is part of who we are. And I think once folks understand that, and when people do understand it from the point of view of the industry and producers and studios that are looking for content, all of those sort of data points, if you will, are important to remember. If you build it, we will support you. We will spend money. We will be, but beyond that, beyond the banality of the monetization of it, it's a business. We must remember that. It's when done right, it allows people to rise up and step forward and believe that they are part of a civic culture. And so that notion of remembering the better angels of our nature can be realized. And that's what I would hope to leave in terms of a takeaway.
It's just beautiful. Thank you so much for that.
Hey, Nancy, no, sorry to interject, and I'm not the right one to do it, but maybe Marcella, you could thank Aaron for writing this seminal work with more grace than I am.
Well, Aaron, it's really cool that Karen mentioned that, and I don't want to put Aaron on the spot, but I'm going to put him on the spot if he will allow us to, por favor. What would you have people take away? Perhaps we should give the author, who is the voice of the other author, the last word, and to say, what should we take away?
I certainly don't want to have the last word in this amazing panel of folks, so I hope others will continue. But I'm really grateful that this incredible team has picked this up and is making it into something really new, and I'm excited to watch that. And I just think that it's hard to underestimate, it's hard to overstate how much of our immigration debates are kind of in this impossible binary between this, like the flawless, perfect, high achieving good immigrant who does maybe deserves rights, and then the evil bad criminal immigrant who deserves all the punishment she gets. And that is an impossible binary, and humans don't fit into that binary. And that, I think, is what's so powerful about this and a lot of the other stories you're talking about telling, is that they're about really complex, flawed, heroic, funny human beings who are making their way through this impossible world that the rest of us who look at immigration from a more privileged perspective have created. So in the end, it's not a story about Ida. It's a story told with Ida about the world that the rest of us have created on the US-Mexico border.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for being a part of this panel today. Thank you all for joining us, our audience members. I feel that in creating movies, more movies that have realistic, which is not necessarily positive images, realistic images, which include positive, which include negative, which include people who make mistakes and people who rise to the top and people who fall and get up again. By doing that, we are creating more portrayals for which our community to be known as. I was born and raised in Chicago, and whenever I say I'm a Chicana from Chicago, if I'm out of the country, immediately people think of Chicago and they think of what? They think of gangs and they think of gangsters. And I said, where did that come from? That comes from the movies. That comes from the movies that people see. Movies is how movies are the medium by which we all are judged, by which we all are known around the world. So by creating more movies that have more realistic portrayals of Latinos, we in fact are adding to this beautiful tapestry of the world and of us. And I think that people will know us to be heroes and know us to be brave and know us to be folks that contribute, and that's a good thing. So I'd like to ask the audience, if you see a movie or a television show that you like, say something, share it, put it on social media, write an email, do whatever you can to enforce that it's a good thing to the business people, the networks and the studios. They need to know that you appreciate that. Embrace all storytelling. The world will be a better place if we all are around the campfire telling our stories to each other. I truly believe that. So again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, all of our producers of Sonora. I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you very much to Kat Taylor. Thank you, Marcela Davison Avilas. Thank you, Giselle. Thank you, Giselle, very much. Many thanks to Cynthia Sykes-Yorkin and Shelley Reed. Many thanks to our writer, Karen Zacharias. Thank you all. The best of luck to you. And please do let us know if there's anything that any of us can do to help you on this journey.
I'm
Thank
going to, one further thank you. I want to thank the behind the scenes people. I want to thank our Stanford University student technicians, Matt and Anella. And I want to thank once again the team, TomKat. They know who they are. Laura O'Connor was just a gift from heaven. We wouldn't have been able to pull this off without her. Kaylee, Aja, Lucy. I'm sure I'm missing a bunch of people, but there's a bunch of really strong women who are working together on this project to tell the story of another really strong women. So thank you to all those folks, to Diego as well, who at Stanford, who helped me to get my tech crew together at the last minute. And Nancy, thank you very, very much for helping us today.
It's my honor.
TomKatFilms.com.
Yeah, for the replay, TomKatFilms.com or the Sundance channel, like their Sundance website, will have this on really soon. Thank you all. A big applause. I'm giving you my applause emoji.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Hasta luego. See you at the
Bye-bye now.
movies.
Bye. Thank you.